Have you ever come across trying to do a big farm or something where you need to push your little watering or whatever vehicle over long distances? Standard way is to get a load of pistons like this, link them all up to your logic, whichever way you do it, and then you'll end up turning it on. The problem there is pistons are not the greatest thing in scrap mechanic in terms of going over a long distance, because they go super floppy, as we are about to see. They're good up to a point, but the longer they go out, the more droop that you get on them. And let me tell you guys, nobody wants a droopy piston. There are a couple of ways around this. Sometimes if you up the speed of the piston, the strength actually increases a little bit. It's a weird thing that happens in scrap mechanic where the speed and the strength are kind of combined together, so you have to run things faster in order to make them stronger. However, with this, it doesn't work. There is, however, another solution to this that some people might say, and that is the fact that you could run your vacuum pump or your machine along a long platform being stabilized by a wheel. This is kind of like what we're going to do right here. There's only one problem with this. Obviously, with the platform there and the wheel on, it stays nice and level, which is exactly what we want it to do. The only problem with this that we have, however, is if we wanted this to go across a big farm. It's good at the minute because it sees us staying nice and straight when we push it outwards. If we wanted to go towards the right, for example, we can no longer support that wheel. So this gave me a couple of interesting things to try and figure out. I was inspired by one of these things. So this is a crane from a dock that does the shipping containers, and these are what inspired me to have a look into today's build. So with today's build, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using just all vanilla parts. I just want to prove to you guys that this is something that you can do in vanilla, and it's easier to show you guys literally with just vanilla parts. I do still have the mod on, it is worth noting that, but I am not going to be using the mod parts for this entire thing. One of those dock cranes that we saw operates in kind of two ways. It has a claw-like thing that comes down and grabs onto the shipping container, and this can move sort of forwards and backwards if you like, and the entire crane itself can then move left and right on rails. So we're going to try and replicate this ourselves. I'm going to do a 6x6 plot to keep it nice and small, just to show you guys what I'm trying to design. Hopefully you'll understand. It's basically going to be designed in such a way that we will be able to scale it up as the farm itself expands over time. So first things first, what I'm setting up here is a cog and gear system that will allow us to move in one direction across the farm. I've got myself a little bit of room at the back so that when we put our device that we'll be planting and watering on, it has got a position where it is off of the farm so that it doesn't interfere with too much. So what I'm doing right here is just setting up the framework that will allow our cog and gear system to run. I'm going to keep these two moving parts independent from each other, which will mean that I can expand this up as it sees, and I'll be able to tweak the movement and the settings individually so we get a little bit more precision. As I look at it here, it is going to move from left to right, and that'll be our first movement. Now, first things first, what I've got to build here is our actual planting and harvesting watering device. This will let me know how wide and long I need to make my transport system in order to hold this machine in the first place. Like I said before right at the start, I'm going to be using all vanilla parts. So we're going to be using a chest, we're going to be using pipe work, and I'm going to be using 3 vacuum pumps that'll do the watering, and I'm going to do the same exact thing on the back of this to use 3 vacuum pumps to do planting. So this is a very basic layout of what it looks like. So this is going to be like for either planting or watering. I'm literally going to mirror this on the side of it again, which will do the opposite. So if one side does planting, the other side will do watering. Well, that's great, but how will you make it move? There's an easy answer to that question. We're going to use wheels on the controller, and we're going to run this off of a switch. We're going to have the controller set so that it has the correct input. So we turn it on, it goes all the way to the end. And then when we need to, we turn it off and it goes all the way to the back. So it's saving us quite a few component kits. You've got to think, if you're going to build this in vanilla, you're going to be needing to save as many things as you can. So by using a controller, which honestly only needs to be level 2 minimum, we're going to save all those component kits that you would waste on upgrading pistons all the way to level 5. So now we've got our main machine. I need to run a little template around this to work out how big our kind of secondary movement is going to be. This is going to be the framework that's going to include the cogs on it that's going to move our farm in one direction. And like I say, the bot on top with the wheels and that will be able to move us in the other direction. So I've got to size this up nicely just to get me a rough size and scale, and then I'll be able to build what I need to build and throw it up on the top of the framework that we built first. On our framework, I'm just going to go and throw in the teeth that the cogs are going to fit into nicely, which will help us get the movement. And then I'll be able to put the cogs onto the little framework that you've just seen me build, and I'll show you how it's all going to go together and how it'll work. Okay, so I'm going to put out 4 cogs to enable us to do this, put in these little pipe work in this direction, and I'm going to build 4 wheels, if you can call them wheels, around the edges of this. And this is what is going to keep this part of the whole construction level and stable, as well as enable it to move smoothly in the directions that we tell it to move. These are all going to be hooked up to one controller, and the controller again is going to be used to fine tweak the movement that we need to do in order to get us in line with the plots on the field that we need to get us in line to. The tricky bit with this, however, is getting it in the right place so that it sits on top. Because obviously they are 2 independent structures, they're not connected to each other, it does make it a little bit difficult, but you can do it with a little bit of iron up and kind of welding in the right place. Just a side note, if you get your welding wrong, you end up sticking one unit to the other unit, and then you have to kind of delete a few blocks just to make sure that they are independent. Not a big problem at this scale, so it was easy to kind of go back and rectify the issue that I made. Once we're happy that part A is in the right position, we have to go and grab part B. Luckily for us, because we kind of took the measurements around this thing, we know that it'll fit. And as you can see here, it fits perfectly. For my own peace of mind, I'm just going to go throw up a little bit of a wall or a barrier around it, just to help keep this thing stabilised and in the centre of where I want it to be, because it's going to run down these 2 channels backwards and forwards. And this is what we need to line up above the plots in order to make it plant and water and harvest and everything else. Now for connecting up. I told you guys that we were going to run this off of a controller, and that's exactly what we're going to do. First controller needs to go to the pipework that we laid out, and what this is going to do is move our base unit, as you can see, along the teeth. We'll run it off of the switch, simply because for this test purposes we don't need to do much other than go from one side of the farm to the other. So we've got to just make sure that we're all happy with where we go. We're going to wind this all the way up to 360 degrees, and then we're going to punch that button, and we're going to see where we go. As you can see, that this is exactly what we want to happen. This movement is going to line us up from one set of the plots over the top of the other set of plots. Bear in mind, I've only got 3 vacuum pumps and our plot is 6 wide. So we'll start off above the first 3, and then we're going to throw this switch, and hopefully that'll get us above the next 3. All of this is going to be run on one controller, which you can scale up as your farm grows. Runs pretty smooth, runs pretty nice. The best thing about using the controller as well is it allows for that fine tweak, just so that I can get exactly where I need to get to. So now we're somewhat happy with phase 1, we've now got to look at phase 2. Phase 2 will be this machine. I'm going to use 2 sensors. One sensor is going to be to trigger the first set of vacuum pumps, and the second sensor is going to be used to trigger the second set of vacuum pumps. With the sensors being placed at either side of the vacuum pumps, it gives me a little bit of a gap where I can change the colours. So for the first sensor, I want it to trigger when the vacuum pump is above the first field, which means the colour goes on the first block of field number 2. And likewise with the sensor at the back, I need the sensor to see the last block of the first field in order to trigger onto the second field, etc. I hope that makes sense. I explained that really poorly, but I hope you guys understand what I mean. As long as the vacuum pumps are above the field, the sensor should see the colour and do the correct thing to trigger. I'm going to use a colour sensor, level 5 sensor. This is where your component kits will go, but this is going to be enabling us to do precision. So now as for the controls of the machine itself, we're just going to use a controller, and we're just going to run the 2 front wheels of this one. So you don't really need a massive level 5 controller for this. You could do it with a level 2 controller because you've got 2 connection points. What I'm going to do is just look at running this all the way up to 360 degrees. Hopefully this won't fall off the end. The only way to find out is just connect it up to the switch and have a play. And the best thing about the controllers and these wheels, we have that fine tuning again so that we're able to increase or decrease the rotation as little or as much as we need to get us exactly lined up where we need to be. So the best thing about this as well is you turn the switch on, the controller will go all the way to one end, and when you turn it off, it will send the machine back. Now it turns out we didn't have enough room here. The machine itself actually bumped into our teeth system, but this is good because it lets me show you guys how easy it is to expand this thing. All I've done here is extend the platform that the wheels run on, and then just literally move our cog system further down. Then all I'm going to have to do is just change where the framework is, which is just a case of running another line of blocks in and just putting the teeth in the right place. And we have literally just extended the farm even further. We've not had to spend any more on any pistons or anything like this. This is all just materials. And who in scrap mechanic doesn't have a lot of wood lying around? It's the easiest resource to get hold of, it's the cheapest to use, and it's really ideal for this job. One final test run to make sure that it can run the full length of the plots. And we are happy with that, it does exactly what we want to do. And now finally, all we've got to do is literally just make sure that the vacuum pumps are above the farm plots so that we hit them when it sees the colours on the sensors. To do that, all I'm going to do is just get a block of wood and just run it up next to the side of the farm so I know where the first farm plot should be versus the first vacuum pump, and then just tweak the controller settings just to make sure it fits. Once we're happy that we're going to start in the right place, all we've got to do is send it across to the second side, so it'll do the second set, and then just again line it up to make sure that it does move across enough so that it'll hit that second set. Any tweaking that needs to be done, we can do that in the controller. So now that we're happy with the dry run, I'm just going to put some water in. I'm going to hook up my sensors to the vacuum pumps. And I'm going to get these guys to trigger exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. And we're going to see if this is going to work how I hope that it'll work. So now that everything's all set up, I'm just going to whack the switch on the machine and hopefully it'll move forwards and it'll water out the front. And it does exactly what we would do. It's hitting every plot. It's doing exactly what I hoped it would do. That's fantastic. Okay, so we can tick that off that it works. And now the whole idea here is we're going to turn off this controller, which will move the entire machine across to the other side. It's a little bit janky at start, and then it seems to move a little bit better. Okay, and then it'll stop when it gets to its end. Now hopefully this will be over top, so if we switch this off, the controller's now turning off. It's rotating, and it is working. It is watering exactly what it wants to water. Interesting enough, going in this direction, it seems to sometimes hit 2 rows of plots. Don't mind about that whatsoever. Water has a bit of a splash effect. The only thing left to try is seeds, to make sure that the seeds can plant in the same way. Just do the exact same thing. We'll hook the sensor up to the back, and then we'll give this a run through. So now if we turn the machine on, we should be able to get watering and planting at the same time. Water might run out because we haven't got that much in it though. So it waters and it plants there. So the water's ran out, that's just fine. But it seems to plant exactly where we want it to do. It does fire another row, but that's probably my fault for getting the paintwork all wrong. That's not a problem. But what this is telling me is this system is working pretty much exactly how I want it to work. Yep, so we ran out of seeds towards the end there. It's not a big deal. Just a concept, just an idea, just a rough draft if you like. I'll just stick 6 more seeds in here just to show you guys that it can work. Really easy. Punch the button. Look at that. Look at that. That is fantastic. And all of this is inspired by a docking crane or even one of those claw grabbing machines that you sometimes see at circuses and fun fairs and stuff like that. Kids arcades, that kind of stuff. If you've made it this far, guys, please don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. And yes, while I'm aware I've only used a planting system and a watering system for this, don't forget that you can reverse the direction of a vacuum pump, so you will be able to harvest with the same system. And also, guys, currently the system is manual, but it can be automated with a little bit of logic. Thanks so much for dropping by to watch this video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time. Take it easy and bye.